So thank you very much for joining our last session. We have a very distinguished and experienced panel of speakers. I'm just going to mention sort of two rules to begin with. Firstly, unfortunately, in this high-tech world, we do not have a clicker to change the slides. We have tried, but for some reason, there can't be one in this room. So an English expression you're about to hear quite frequently is "next slide, please," I'm afraid. And that will need to be the case for our speakers. The second issue is we're going to try and make this as interactive as possible. So, of course, we have presentations and opinions for you, but we very much want your questions, your ideas, and I will encourage that across the panel members up here. So very good. We're going to start by testing this manual technology. Here we go. Next slide, please. Yeah. If I say it twice, let's see if something happens. Next slide, please. Yes. I didn't say no slides, please. I said, I said next slide, please. And that's not it either, and the screen doesn't work here. We're back again. Let's try again. That slide doesn't count because that's the one we already had. So, at the risk of being boring, next slide, please. We're the wonders of human communication. So just very briefly, for those of you who don't know me, I'm the Chief Executive of AMBA, the Association of MBAs, and we're very proud to accredit 12 schools in Russia, and we have around 1,000 student and graduate members here. I'm also the chairman, the current chairman of United Nations Prime, Principles for Responsible Management Education, for those of you who came to the session yesterday. I just have a few slides to talk about current dynamics in the market, and here we're telepathic because slides are coming before I ask them, but that's fine. Just very briefly, AMBA, we accredit 253 business schools out of 16,000 in the world, of which 12 are Russian. Next slide, please. And we have 32,000 student and graduate MBAs as members. That's increased 500% in 3 years. Membership is free. If you have a qualification from a school here, AMBA accredited qualification, you can be free members of AMBA, and you join a unique community worldwide of 32,000 other MBAs. Next slide, please. And this just explains the quality of the schools that you are from. Very briefly, what our criteria are to become an AMBA accredited school. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So just to set in terms of the Russian market, I'm just going to share 5 or 6 factual slides with you of what's been happening in the MBA market in Russia. And this was some research we did with Parthenon and Ernst & Young less than 12 months ago. And these are the results of 11 leading Russian business schools. Next slide. So what is the length and format of the MBA programs offered by your school? And you can see here that in the Russian market, far and away, the most common MBA program is a 2-year part-time program. That is more extreme than the rest of the world, that would have more full-time 1-year program and full-time 1.5-year programs, but is reflective of Russia, China, and all our Latin American schools, where practically, quite rightly, mature students need to work at the same time as doing their program. But one of the questions for today and our speakers is people wanting a qualification quicker than 2 years. Is this possible? And if so, what should the Russian market do without losing any of the quality of learning of that program? Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. The other question is an MBA in Russia practical enough, or is it too theoretical? And we've asked deans all over the world, what % of teaching faculty have actually got industry experience? And to your credit in Russia, this split is a pretty good example of where there are good industry practitioners. In many of the other leading markets in the world, there are more theoretical and research-based professors teaching. So Russia can't be accused of, compared to the rest of the world by and large, not having enough people with business experience teaching. One could argue that even more business people in all business schools should be teaching. But again, that's a discussion for the panel today. Next question, please. Please select the course or program taught at your school that most uses blended learning. The whole issue of this conference is, in a digital world, are schools using enough technology and teaching enough technology to teach? And it's very pleasing from an MBA perspective that it's the MBA program here where the blended and digital learning is most being practiced. In much of the rest of the world, it would be the more junior master's program getting most of the blended learning, or undergraduate programs with younger students where more IT-savvy digital learning is being used. Next slide. Then the question here is, having started blending learning, what percentage of Russian courses, Russian MBAs, are delivered online? And you can see that the vast majority of content is still not delivered online. And this world of 100% MBAs being digital and online is still a long way away. Next slide. And I think this is the final one. Then another question has been, should MBA programs evolve to be more specialist, or should they stay more general? And Russia leads the way in the world here with industry-specific MBAs. I don't know of another country in Amber's network, and we accredit schools in 70 countries where 75% of the schools are offering some form of industry-specific MBA. Many of these in Russia are, of course, related to the oil and gas industry. Now, you're going to test my memory. I'm going to say next slide, please. I think this might have been my last one. Next slide, please. Great. That's the end of my intro. Okay. So I'd now like to welcome up our first speaker, from a super quality school well known to everyone in Russia and outside, and that is Konstantin Krotov, the first Deputy Director of the Graduate School of Management at St. Petersburg State University. Konstantin, over to you.
Thank you very much, and first of all, thank you for invitation to this panel. It's my honor and pleasure to be here today. Can you hear me well? Yes? Okay. Andrew, I was not ready to be first. I thought that I would disagree with somebody who was a previous speaker, but you know, our program now is in the middle of Amber Review, and I can't disagree with you. But I was prepared for the other situation of having no clicker, and I prepared no slides for that. And so if you don't mind, I will throw in some of my ideas and answer the question you asked before, and Stan will be happy to contribute to the discussion. So when I thought about the topic that is on our only slides, I thought that who actually benefits of the disruptive technologies in contemporary worlds. And when you think about it, well, there are some big companies, and we all know them. But usually it's a fast-changing company, and when we talk about companies who change fast, it's entrepreneurial, small startups, so these kind of words that we can immediately say after fast-changing and fast-growing companies. And when we talk about these kind of companies, digital companies if we want, we should think about the environment they live in. And the environment is awful. I mean, they have to change fast. They have to make a decision, change the company, restructure the company before the launch tomorrow. They have no time to go to MBA, select MBA program. They have no time to read the cases, the articles, discuss the cases, then reflect, think how I would change my company, and maybe 3 or 4 years later do that. They will die by that time, Actually, there is, I mean, nobody said that they're dying because after tomorrow, they start a new company and everything repeats again, and this is life. So there is no problem with that. But if you talk really about disruptive technologies, digital technologies, it's really hard to think what kind of MBA they should have. Probably, and you were talking about the shortening of the time of MBA, maybe immediate MBA or some parts of this MBA. And then if you talk about, thank you for your words about Graduate School of Management, if you talk about what we do, and if you don't mind, I'll share our experience. We also see these trends, and we used to have, for a very long time, a well-established executive MBA program. And last 2 years probably, we noticed that the group, the MBA groups, the MBA students, they started to be very different in class. And we have some more entrepreneurial students. The others are from really big companies, top managers. And they have different needs. They have different backgrounds. They have not much to share with each other. They want to talk on different topics. They need different courses. So we decided that we'll make executive MBA even more executive and more interesting for these type of top managers. And at the same time, we'll launch a second program, another program, a shorter one. The executive MBA is 2 years, and the new program is slightly more than 1 year. It's more digital, with a digital focus. So yes, how to run the companies in this digital environment, in this disruptive environment. And we have special courses for that, we prepare special courses for that. And yes, we will have some online component for that. So it's much more blended than the, I would say, original program. And this is how we see at least our clients. But again, Russia is really different from the rest of the world from this perspective. And your slides actually prove that. And environment does a lot, and it influences a lot on what we offer. It was really hard, impossible to offer full-time MBA, so it's all part-time. Now we see these trends and we react to that. I can't share the results yet because we launched it in April, but this is our approach and this is our understanding. I can share more about that if you would like.
And do you mix at all those entrepreneurs and large company managers? Because although they want to learn different things, an entrepreneur has to have the all-round business skills of a general manager, or the chance of their business failing is higher because that entrepreneur has to understand HR, strategy, operations, finance, marketing. So funnily enough, I feel they need similar skills, albeit at a different scale of business. But do you mix them up at all?
Right now, yes. And so far it was not a really good experience because the scale is different. So scale actually matters. And in future, they will have a chance to do that. They will have a chance to interact. But originally, the cohorts will be different.
Thank you. Any questions for Konstantin at this stage? We have a couple of roving mics. Do feel free to ask anything you would like. Okay, yeah, we have 2 questions, one on either side.
Can you tell me, Mikhail Kozlov, Moscow Business School, the translation of disruptive technologies. Well, disruptive technologies have been translated as breakthrough technologies into Russian. Do you think it's an adequate translation? Because in my personal opinion, the whole idea of disruptive is, in the first place, about disrupting something, some established things. These are more disruptive as well, it's a matter of words in Russian. So do you think that in this particular case, the era of disruptive technologies is the same of the era of breakthrough technologies? Well, I don't know. Which language should I use in answering?
Presentation. If you look at the program that we started, it's we understand disruptive technologies as the innovation that disrupt, in Russian, подрывают, the business models. And we do see the examples of the companies who actually do that and live in these environments in our class, and they need a different approach in the class.
I have a question. Who teaches these innovators, other innovators, or the old economics professors?
And it's probably one of the most difficult questions. Even if these are the professors from the old school, as you say, I mean, there is nothing similar with the old professors and those who teach. Because even if they are old and they have these backgrounds, they retrained 1 million of times, they have experience, and they have chosen to teach on this program. We do select carefully the professors who are teaching on any program, especially this one, and this is a challenge. And usually, and this program especially, most of the professors, they are of a significantly younger age, actually. And if I can make another example, it's also a new program for big data and masters on business analytics and big data. So it's a pre-experienced master program. And I mean, this is for us a challenge to find professors, and we look at the professors who are maybe maximum 40 years old, and they have international experience, they have experience in the industry, and very often it's the international professors.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. Konstantin, thank you very much. We're happy to take some more questions later. So I'm now going to introduce our next speaker, Valeria.
Just Valeria.
Just Valeria. Okay, I was going to. No, I'm going to have a go at it. Valeria.
Horrible surname, Pavlukovskaya.
Pavlukovskaya.
Yeah.
Not bad.
Oh, not too bad. Yeah,
Good. And Valeria is the partner for Russia and CIS of the very highly respected IMD. Over to you.
It's very kind of you, and if you do not mind, I would be speaking Russian in respect to our audience. Hopefully, like everything works.
All is good.
Okay, perfect. So, okay, yeah, the one, though I have animation, and I have quite a bit of animation within every single slide.
Okay,
but a good news that I have a superwoman, my colleague Svetlana Yefimova, who would be replacing this magical clicker. Okay, so let's start. Добрый вечер.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to introduce myself once again. I'm Valeria Pavlikovskaya, partner for Russian CIS of IMD International Business School. That seems, according to the FT rating, has been #1 worldwide in executive education. These are open programs and executive education programs. What I'd like to say today, perhaps only a lazy publication will not criticize MBA programs, claiming that they don't match the new requirements set to them by business today, and that managers being trained today through today's MBA programs cannot exactly be called effective leaders, especially in the situations of uncertainty and the situations of constant change. Well, I'm sorry. It's a problem without a clicker, so I'll probably skip those animations. As the MBA, it's not a news. We all know that a standard for a Master of Business Administration appeared in the beginning of the 20th century as a response to the requirements of the second industrial revolution. And the managerial approaches that were embedded in the first MBA programs were responding to the top-down approach to management. Quite clear separation of functions and a strong focus on planning and budgeting. There's no doubt that a lot of changes have happened since that time in the managerial sort. The management approaches have changed, as you see in this slide. And in my personal opinion, I wouldn't be even talking about leading MBA programs. Well, they were coping. All of them were coping, more or less, with reinventing themselves and making themselves relevant to the new challenges that business was posing for the role of leader. It was going on until the start of the 21st century. Today, the question is how we, business schools, leading or advanced MBA providers, what do we have to do? Reinventing ourselves to bring up the leaders that will be effective not only today, but who will also be successfully managing business in the reality that has become so dynamic, that as dynamic as we haven't seen before. Today's environment, today's ecosystem, as I would call it, where the leader is finding themselves, as Konstantin says, is not simple. It's a difficult, complex time. And it's not really only about the scale of change, but more about the pace of change. It looks like some professions will go away, some will appear. It's not very clear who is going to teach people new profession, and what new disruptive technologies are there in store for us. Sorry, but it's a fact, but knowledge has become a short life product. Even if we're talking about an 11-month NCEAD programs, which used to be perceived as a super program giving super relevant knowledge, has come under question. Won't these 11 months be too much for information to be relevant? And continuous learning, continuous self-development, and continuous practice of applying these new knowledge, this new knowledge has become kind of daily hygiene. Of course, we have to manage virtual teams, how to motivate these people, how to manage 4 generations of people with absolutely different motivations and values in the same work environment. And then there's a question, who is that effective leaders? What are these special qualities? Why are they so new? And maybe the most important question that we should answer as an MBA school, how to develop these new traits and characters if we don't even know what they are. Can you click through it? Thank you. IMD, responding the answer of what this leadership model is about and what these characteristics are about and what is this leadership behavior, has conducted a multi-stage study. I'm not going to go into detail. We did it in partnership with 2 respected companies, Hogan and Melby. So today, and based on this research, we've identified characteristics which are not really revolutionary. So largely speaking, we've heard about all of them before, but maybe the combinations of them has become different. Let me explain. This model doesn't rule out the values and characteristics of a leader that we have come to know, but the accents are put in a different way. So talking about these new characteristics, firstly, it's about being humble. It's about being agile, to be able to adapt to new people, to new generations, to new requirements of business, and do it all the time. That's being visionary, and the fourth is engagement. But the physical behaviors that a future leader should bring up in themselves to be relevant today and tomorrow are about hyper-awareness, a lot of information around them, and yes, we have to pass it on through us. And thank God technologies allow us doing that, synthesizing it and get the information that we need. But we have to be inquisitive, we have to be looking around ourselves all the time, monitoring the situation. We have no right to make a decision only based on our intuition, even on our experience. It's just because our own experience can become not too relevant with regard to today's reality. So to be informed and to make decisions based on this information is an integral requirement. Another, fast execution, prototyping, not to measure 7 times and cut once, but exactly the opposite. Much more need, maybe even to make mistakes, but to move fast. So the question is, okay, if we understood this model, all these characteristics, traits, and so on and so forth, how to bring them up in a leader? And in our opinion, can I have the next slide? We believe that not excluding and not instead of business education, but as an addition to it, to business fundamentals and managerial skills that we don't throw away. We believe that MBA programs should make a deeper accent on the following 6 components. These are self-awareness and understanding ourselves. We, as a product, people, leaders, are becoming the most important, the epicenter, the most important component, the epicenter of all the education. It's about being able not only to understand your own strengths and weaknesses, but how they're perceived by other people, and what we call mindful leadership. The second component here is about the development of what we can globally call agile leadership. I'll explain how we do it. It's about bringing up tech-savvy leaders regardless of their educational background and their career before the MBA program. It's about imbuing leaders with new skills, qualities, and traits, approaches, so that each of them should become a really effective innovator. Also understanding how to create an innovation culture within your team or a company, how to develop an innovation strategy, how to implement this. And this fifth focus is not new. Immediate application of the knowledge acquired in practice to solve real-life problems of business and society. But in our opinion, even a stronger focus should be made on that. And the last thing, frankly, the most difficult part, I'll just explain how we work with them, what response we found to this question. It's about learning how to learn and basically infecting the participants of MBA programs with the hunger for self-development and learning. And the next slide. Let me explain. No, please. It's too early for Manzoni. Thank you. Let me explain how we're solving, how we're making these accents, how we work with them. The first thing, I was mentioning self-awareness. We're paying a lot of attention in especially executive MBA programs to leadership, responsible, self-aware leadership, not just classes in all the formats we're a part of, lecture and coaching. We use all sorts of new models, role simulations. We don't only use outdoor exercises, but we do individual and group leadership exercises of a new generation, as I would call them, because the purpose here is not just to practice the skills, but also to learn listening to yourself, to learn managing your energy, and also, which is important at this day and age, to be able to handle stress. The second point that I meant when I was talking about agile leadership, how do we develop them? We have a capability, and we integrated it in all our executive MBA programs to integrate a whole lot of new classes. Digital business, digital strategy, digital operational management, digital marketing, and I can list other components. What I'm personally excited about of our latest developments the most is that we've launched a new class this year. Actually, it happened. How to bring up tech-savvy leaders in management. So as part of our MBA, we launched a program that's called Digital Laboratory. Digital Laboratory. It's Digital Lab. It's a program where our participants are getting very deep into understanding how different technologies work, where regardless of their educational backgrounds, could be a former humanities student or a journalist like myself, so where they learn programming, for instance, and through this new mindset, they are changing their perspective, trying to see through a programmer's eye how to look at management, when they look behind the curtain of what happens behind the scenes during technological breakthroughs. This, we believe, is very important for the managers of today and tomorrow. They should understand these things. These guys never stop on learning these technologies and programming, for instance. The purpose of this class is to create a specific product, a service, a new idea, and basically to bring it to the market. So this is the way to solve a lot of innovation challenges. There are lots of formats. Design thinking methodology is also used broadly. A lot of other approaches are used to create new products. But the most important thing to use new approaches to create innovative culture. We create even a special program in Innovation Lab. So this is how we implemented it all in practice. I'm not going to list. This approach has been in existence as long as IMD has been in existence. But what we're doing even more today is when we take participants to other countries such as Kenya, Vietnam, China, India, and a lot of new countries, we always work with them not only on real-life business challenges, but also we are trying to make sure they're very diverse. It could be a large consulting project for a large enterprise. It could be an immersion to a small business in Africa where you have to make a difference with your own hands in 10 days to help this business to become better. And of course, to learn from this experience how to manage business in this country, and so on and so forth. And the last, that's the infection with this hunger virus. How you incentivize people to keep learning and keep developing even after the program is finished. I think we are doing quite a good job there, because our methodology, real learning and real impact, has been focused from the outset on not explaining too much, not offering ready-made answers to the questions. So the outcome in our case is such that we create such a program and curriculum where people need to learn thinking creatively, going beyond the comfort limits in order to be able to find answers themselves. And quite often these answers turn out to be much better than we could offer. And this story infects people so much during the learning process. Then from the feedback with our alumni, it looks like we're quite successful in doing that. So that's our experience, and I'm hoping that it's been useful and it's going to be useful for you. Thank you.
Valeria, thank you very much indeed. Any questions for Valeria at this stage? Starting with the front row, and we'll come to you in a second.
Thank you so much. I'm from Rostov-on-Don in the Russia south. You speak so wonderfully, and if I had an opportunity to enroll in your business school, I would do it immediately. But I would like to address you as a researcher. So you said that digital transformation of society, opens up opportunity for new leaders. And we also had a plenary session involving Mr. Chubais in the morning, and we had a lecture on artificial intelligence. And the AI intervention is increasing. But how can we run these kind of organizations? How can we transform our MBAs so that we can teach people to run an organization where you have a higher level of AI penetration, or on borderline zones? Do you have any vision? Where should we go? How can we transform our programs?
Безусловно.
Thank you so much for your question. We do have some experiments, some pilot projects. And certainly we all promote and favor practice-based learning. And when we have a new management environment, we try to simulate it. We don't have any software-based simulation, but we try to simulate an environment where we need to handle both technology and people. Absolutely. And by way of response to your question, as a kind of a new format, a kind of a new content, you need to simulate, also based on some software, an environment that would reflect a company, an organization where you would have to handle both AI and humans. It's just plans, and our considerations. We don't have a solution. So, again, it's all about gamification, an attempt to show people how to do it, and then would have a reflective session where people would find solutions for themselves. Igor Alyoshin, business coach on project management, and I run several courses here at RunNepa. Well, you said that knowledge is a product with a short shelf life. But, when you have MBA students, these are people who have not been taught anything for 10 to 15 years, and they come to update their knowledge. So, a question for you would be, should I provide them with the latest technology, with the latest knowledge, because people would know nothing about project management. They would be novices to this. So what should I teach them? The basics, the ABC, or perhaps give them advanced knowledge? Well, I wouldn't say that you have to come to something disruptive straight away. No. I talked about the new focuses for MBAs and EMBAs, and I just said that that comes to, in addition to the basics, because business education has a standard, and you have to comply with that standard. And even before you move to matrix BCG 2.0, you have to be aware that you have the BCG 1.0 matrix. So you need to give some background, some history, so that the person has, knows the rationale, so that they know the cause and effect, the evolution of project management, and why companies use completely different models today. We have 5 forces of Porter today, and in certain cases they're becoming less and less relevant. We're talking about moving beyond industrial borders. We need to look at ecosystems. But again, first you need to tell them why you need Porter's 5 forces. Otherwise they won't be able to understand why you need the new disruptive or revolutionary models. So the basics should remain as part of the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions. Moving on to our next session now, I'm delighted to welcome Paul Mattessens, who is the Dean of the Antwerp Business School of Management in Belgium. Welcome, and
Thanks.
over to you.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I learned one thing. I think that the simultaneous translators in Russia are the best in the world, because with this speed of speaking, the guy remained really calm. So I think we should give him an applause, really. You should do that. I would have committed suicide, I think, with this speed. Congratulations. Okay, I'm Dean of a boutique business school. We are probably about the size of one cohort or so of their executive MBA, so a small school, but a very international school, also on all rankings and also in the top 100 of all rankings, and also let's say AMBA and AACSB accredited. So we are struggling also as a school on business transformation, because also our industry is changing dramatically, naturally, and this session in a way captures both the outside world and how we could react in adapting our own programs and why we should. So I have prepared a few slides, so please, next slide. So there are extreme challenges faced by everyone at this moment, and this is just a survey of about 200 managers, mostly in industrial markets. And in fact, I don't have to read all this. You can read it by yourself. Transition, change, reshaping of things is what is key. And also combining roles, like roles of development, and also branding, value differentiation, and the like. We have to combine these. Now I have, next click please, I have a statement here of one senior marketing executive, which refers to some of the older concepts, and so perhaps that links also a little bit into the preceding question. Yes, we should know what segmentation is. Yes, we should know what differentiation is, etc. But we have to combine it with innovation. Probably we have to do both in order to survive. Next slide. What we basically see is that we live more and more either on, let's say, business-to-consumer platforms or in the industrial internet, Industry 4.0. We live in smart cities, and the Internet of Things is really something that is changing, dramatically changing what we offer, how we interact. So the linear thinking of having a product and pushing that through a supply chain or a value chain towards, let's say, passive consumers, it's totally upside down. We live in multi-sided platforms, and sure, they have to know still a global supply chain management course, and still they have to know what purchasing is, etc. But definitely in this type of world, we need to have new skills really also towards our students. Moreover, next slide, what we also see is that we live in a completely changing societal context. Right side of this slide, you see a picture. We asked some children, together with the Industry Federation, we asked children of between 6 and 12 years how a factory looked like, how they look at a factory. And this was the winning picture. And you see that it uses solar energy, wind energy, etc., etc. It's a sustainable factory that this child designed. Also, I'm always telling my MBA students that probably their children will not possess a car anymore, unless they rob a car from a car-sharing service or so. But yes, we live in that sharing economy, and so a lot of the economic theory and marketing theory, for instance, based on possession and utility that you seek, etc., but that will be out of date in a certain way pretty soon when we have all 120,000 cars in a city like San Francisco daily, where we have them replaced by 6,000 to 7,000 self-driving electric cars on which you jump and you jump on and off, and you never have to wait more than 3 seconds. And then naturally connected, hyper-connected world that must lead to some differences in how we teach, how to connect, how to treat others, roles in networks, etc. We lived in that networked economy. So what to do? Well, we have to become butterflies. I think butterflies are the most amazing animals, yeah, insects in the world. They can transform. They can transform very fastly. And you might say, yes, then they die. But they're pretty to look at anyway while they live. Now, as you look at this, and I'm sorry for the last speaker, which probably didn't want me to have a KPMG statement here, coming from PwC. But in any case, I think he will agree also that what you see in all industries is that companies are completely redefining their business models, right? And so we have to equip students to be able to do that, future leaders. So who can do this? And that's next slide. I have 5 slides, by the way, so we are underway. So who can do this? And you will see some repetition from the preceding speaker, naturally. So agile leaders will be able to do this. And what will they do? Well, for instance, and this is definitely not an exhaustive list, right? They will do early trends detection, that's for sure. And also will be able to do future road mapping, visioning. Perhaps we learned some scenario thinking to our students in the past. Now we have to learn them how to do visioning and how to do future road mapping, for instance. And yes, the third one there, you need to apply design thinking there. So I thought my school was a bit behind on that. So on the 1st of January, I kind of integrated, I merged with a small institute of design thinkers. And in 1 year and a half, they really had a big impact on all our programs. And it's now a standard aspect in all the projects that our students do, for instance, the full-time master students and the MBA students. Agile leaders are able to analogize, and that's a very important one. They shouldn't be just funneled in their own industry, but they're able to learn from other industries that are totally different and that are a little bit ahead of their own. And to interpret and to wide frame that, to make sense of that. So sense making is also very important. Design thinking we had, so then think in terms of multi-sided platforms. It's out to think in supply chains. We need to understand how platforms work, what the different roles are, strategies in platforms, how to do that. And then a subject on which I myself publish, become network mobilizers. Yeah? In my own research, I really look at how companies, even in rigid industries like the steel industry, how they can become network mobilizers, because you cannot change that industry on your own. You have to use that ecosystem. And even in my own school, we are a relatively small school, as I said. Well, we have spaces there for young startup companies. For instance, I changed my marketing department in that way by integrating these young people in the school. And then some of them remained and they work with us. Some do that also on an outsourcing, in an outsourcing way. But I think that's really important, how to mobilize ecosystems and networks. Then use big data, use cloud also, and the preceding speaker, she said like tech savviness. I called it tech acumen, but we mean the same thing. There's a study in Belgium and also in France, I think, but I'm not sure whether that also exists in Russia, for instance. It's called commercial engineering. And they get a lot about technologies, but not enough to become real full-fledged engineers. But they get a lot of that in any case so that they can speak the language, they can interpret it. I think we should all become a little bit tech engineers, commercial engineers probably in the future. Be change agents, that's more on the soft side, but you can only do that when you can motivate your organization to go with you, to go into transformation. And that leads into the other one, lead and motivate professionals. They will all have more complex jobs. And my chairman, for instance, in our school, he comes from the beer industry. And I have several clashes with him because he wants me to govern the school as he is used in Interbrew, a big multinational. So he tells me like, wow, all that matter, all that pampering you do, all these discussion with your people, loss of time, just tell them this page is black and from then you will say it's black or you're out. I told him, then I will be out because this is not a way that we can manage people for the future. So that's that point. Then act as intra and entrepreneurs. I think we should bring our students, in fact, to entrepreneurs also to get acquainted with how they work. For instance, lean startup, that kind of thinking. And make wise decisions. I put it in the back, but it is very important. Sustainability, ethics, etc. is important. And in fact, you can go to the last slide. Last slide where I just have a question. And it's not a critical thinking, it's about myself in a way. Yeah? Are we, and probably also some of these other 14,000 schools, or what was it, 16,000, that have MBA programs, are we really redesigning our MBA programs fast enough? Yeah? Are they fit for this job? And I was thinking, this is a typo. I put jog there. But in a way, it's not such a bad typo because it's also like jogging, you know. You have to do it faster and faster, and you have to train yourself to change. And I put there some of these. It's more like a summary, but with a few more words and capabilities behind, like what capabilities, what new concepts, and also what new learning formats do we need. But as you heard at IMD, they're also experimenting with some of these, like labs, bringing arts in. We send our students also even to the museums to watch the Rubens Museum in Antwerp, to the diamond industry, etc., so that they can use that type of analogies as well and learn to do out-of-the-box thinking. The question remains, are we progressing fast enough? In any case, this panel is a start, and I think we should propelled by AMBA, keep on our track of doing this transition. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Paul. Do we have any questions for this session? Yes? Second row on the right.
So you said you're a boutique business school. Why is it so particular? What particular things do you offer as a boutique business school?
It is so that well, anyway, I hope now that the translator did his work, or I might respond to another question, that one that you asked. A boutique business school, we made an analogy with boutique hotels, yeah? We cannot be, like a Hilton or a Marriott, which is probably IMD, is more like a Marriott. It's very good service and so on. But we are much smaller. We are an autonomous business school linked to the university, but not owned by, and I only have 10% or so of subsidies, let's say. The rest I have to earn on the market. So it's a small business school. And so we said, like, okay, you see also that in metropolitan cities, that like San Francisco or so, that there are a few boutique hotels, yeah, which are upscale, which are offering a very good service, and which have also a little bit of thrilling environment, you know. You expect there to find the latest television sets and the latest music, whatever possibilities, and gym and things like that. But so we kind of summarized it in 3 keywords, which is caring, daring, and outstanding. And that's what we are training now our personnel for, to care for our students in a really very personal way. We a lot on their personality. We coach them intensely and so on. Then daring a little bit with new formats, new projects, and things like that. And then also outstanding, also in the sense of sustainability. We are, I think, Jonas Hartl is also here. On my right side, on your left side, in the back row there, from PRME. I think we are a forerunner also on that aspect, and we really want to be that, to educate our students to become sustainable career holders, not just money holders. And all that we pack around a slogan which is 3 tired. The first is opening minds, which is, I think, many business schools have that. The second is a bit more daring. It's touching souls. We really want to touch the personality of our students so that they say afterwards, you changed my view on life. You changed my personality. And we make their personality stronger, we hope, that way. And the last is energizing business. And I do hope that they bring energy, that they feel empowered to change industry afterwards. So this is a little bit an answer to that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we're just over halfway through. A question for 3 of you. We've had 3 deans so far. You showed Valeria as your first slide the very lazy negative press about the MBA. I mean, we as Amber and as a collection of schools, we do a lot to point out that's not true. But what should you as schools be doing? Should you be responding to the media and saying, this is nonsense, here's an example, by doing your own press releases? Or should you just ignore it and through the quality of innovative programs just quietly prove that isn't so?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, interesting question. I do not think that we should really respond directly to the media. I would be more oriented, as you just mentioned, on the result and have more result-driven approach as a response to these critiques. But I actually like this criticism because it makes us also alive and makes us thinking. I mean, is there kind of any percentage of the truth? I mean, are we really up to the, let's say, speed? What are the new requirements? And in most cases, I should tell you, if we would disagree with a certain or even the dominant number of the critiques, there would be some that are actually relevant. I believe that we do not change fast enough. Yes, we do experiment, but I do not want to say that we're the best and the most innovative school in the world, and okay, this is a role model. So we do try to be agile, but I definitely think we can do better. So, yeah, thank you.
Okay, Konstantin, do you have a view on that? Do you respond to Russian media criticism of MBAs and master's programs?
If you would respond directly, that would mean that you lose the game. I totally agree that, I mean, we should take it like a negative feedback and make it better, and that's what we do. So I don't think we should respond, but we should be better and more agile, and tell something different. I mean, look, check something else out, you know.
Paul, do you feel the same way?
I would stimulate some of your star alumni that have a lot to say in industry, if they feel that it was valuable for them, that they, in a way, would kind of enter into the debate in a different way. But I agree that we don't have to lose our time. We have to too much in that discussion and learn from that critique. I think sometimes the critiques are also a little bit valid, yeah? If you really look like in some business schools, it is quite old-fashioned. So I think IMD is a good example of more of an innovative business school, but some business schools are quite not so innovative. And I think here, and then I come back to you, I think here the accreditation bodies do play an important role to stimulate innovation, and I think you do that, and AACSB does that as well. But I have my doubts about Financial Times ranking, for instance, which is an important one, plays a dramatic role, and I find that really a very old-fashioned and not reliable. For instance, 40% of the MBA ranking is linked to salary level increase. Now, if I take from my only 30 students that we have in Belgium and about 20 in Moscow, if we take 20 social entrepreneurs in my cohort, I know that 3 years from now, I will have a damned bad rating, and perhaps I fall out of the top 100 because 40% of the rating has to do with salary increase, and these social entrepreneurs who have startups that are socially relevant, they will not bring me that salary increase. If I take people from 50 years old in my MBA, because I say like these managers need to be trained to become business, they still have to go 20 years in their careers. They cannot, like in the past for the last 15 years, like do nothing anymore in their companies. No, they have to embrace change, transformation, and so on. So we need to take on board people from 50 plus years old in our MBA programs. But we will be punished by the rankings of Financial Times afterwards because they will not have the salary increase of a 25 to 30-year-old. So if we don't do anything about that, and there I think the industry should have the balls, sorry to say that, to speak for ourselves, we should change this Financial Times ranking system in a way, because it's not sustainable. And I look towards PRME, and I know that also GRLI, Global Responsible Leadership Initiative, we have to couple these together with AMBA and AACSB to change that, I think. It's okay.
I do totally agree with that. I mean, just to say, I've come from chairing our Asia Pacific Deans and Directors Conference in Harbin in China, and the same issue was raised with our Chinese and Australian deans, and we have agreed as AMBA that not just with the FT, but with many of the overly biased towards salary rankings group, we're going to form a group of AMBA schools and go forward on that. I know IMD have had a very strong view on that as well. Very good. All right, well, I'm now going to hand over to a double act on my left-hand side. One of the big personalities of the Russian education world, arguably one of the big personalities of Russia, actually, Sergei Kalanjan, who is the Dean of the Graduate School.
Сергей Караджан, декан Высшей школы корпоративного управления РАНХ ИГ.
Olga, who is the International Director of the school, will also speak. Sergei, over to you first.
Thank you very much. Excuse me, some words in Russian. Of course. Дорогие друзья, я хотел сначала...
Well, dear friends, I wanted to start with English, but I have a certain idea to implement, so I'll share a few introductory ideas. I'm actually in a losing position because after the great representatives of business schools of the West, it's very difficult to speak. But I'm being helped by the Chinese wisdom, saying that in a garden there should be all sorts of fruit trees growing, different. And in the world of business education, also there's room for different business schools. Talking about fruit trees, I believe that with the probability of 1, I know better than my colleagues from the West how mandarins are growing in subtropics. Talking about mandarins or tangerines in subtropics, it's almost like the customers of our business schools talk about business, because Russia is a cold country and we love tangerines or clementines in the New Year season. So in order to have those tangerines for your New Year day, you need to take care of these trees very much. And when it's becoming cold, you should run and cover these trees so that the fruit should not suffer. So this is a similar way for us to work with those people who want to learn at our institutions. We take care of them, we love them, we achieve that reciprocity with them because of this explicit local care. So we think globally, of course. And of course, the stars of Western business schools are always looming in front of our eyes. But of course, here in Russia, we need to take care of our specificity and respond to local demands. So this is why I want to tell you that the Higher School of Corporate Governance, how it handles this, how it makes sure the mandarins don't get frozen. The important thing is engagement. The engagement of the staff and the engagement of our alumni through the Alumni Association. That's what we're doing. And most importantly, 3 of our products, MBA products, Euro Management MBA, Euro Management EMBA, and Doctor of Business Administration, DMA. And then we're putting stakes on delegating the authority to competent employees and to teamwork. These are the elements. Then, regardless of our seeming distance from Western Europe, you know, we also want to live. We also love you know, to surround ourselves with beautiful things. We like going places and watching, you know, white people living. Is the translator doing his job? So we're setting ambitious goals for us. And as opposed to you, we quite often have to grow in the falling market. So growing in the falling market, that's perhaps something that our Western companies, Western colleagues wouldn't understand. But we have to do it. And there Amber comes to our help. Because always somebody has to come. So who can come to us? Andrew comes, or he sends his agents here, so that they should get your business school accredited. Of course, you suffer for a few months, but then there are good people, they come to you and they issue you an accreditation. They issue you an accreditation, and then immediately you hike prices for your program because you've suffered, right? Yeah? No. Because Amber guests like a 4 or 5 stars hotel, you need to kind of offset this. You need to find the money. Or you've invested, and then you need to find it. So I'm very thankful to our people in Russia for being able to appreciate. When you raise the price in the crisis condition after Amber gives you an accreditation, raise the price by 10%, then somehow they come back to you. So you've risen the price, but then we've been able to collect 10% more people for our MBA program. So this is the way we live here. I would like to make a present to Andrew, and I'd like this specificity that Olga mentioned, because Olga was responsible for this accreditation, and this engagement, this involvement, this delegation, it's almost like a case for you. Olga, please replace me to do that.
It's a big pleasure for me to be here today. And we're discussing a really very interesting topic, the future of Russian business education. Here on the slide, there is rather a provocative question. Do traditional business schools have a future in 5, 10, and even 25 years? Or do they risk to be replaced by other players who are more flexible and more adaptive to the market? Please, next slide. On the first slide, we demonstrate a business school as a planet. It is surrounded by other planets, stakeholders who are interested in business education development. At the same time, a business school is a part of the atmosphere, the environment which influences all the key processes in business education. Today, we face completely new trends in Russian business education environment. You can see them on the slide. In order to stay competitive and sustainable in this environment, business schools should satisfy the needs of all the key stakeholders and at the same time quickly react to the appeals of the environment. A business school can choose two ways how to react to these appeals. To perceive them as new problems or to use them as new opportunities for development. I will briefly focus on three main trends which are the most critical for Russian business schools today. They are globalization, new technologies development, and job market transformation. Next slide, please. Today we live in a globalized world, and the borders in business between different countries disappear. That is why students and graduates should be able to work in the international context. What can a business school do to face this appeal of globalization? The first thing is compliance with the international standards. If we want to be the leaders in the market, we need to use the best world practices in business education. That is the reason why Triple Crown accreditations have already become the quality mark in Russia. The second opportunity is to increase the international learning experience in all the programs, in the form of students and faculty exchange, seminars abroad, double degree programs, and many others. Finally, Russian business education becomes more and more attractive in the world, in Asia, Latin America, Eastern Europe, and of course CIS countries. It is the good time not only to import but export business education. The next slide, please. The next trend we observe today is the high-speed development and dissemination of new technologies. Actually, today we live in the fourth industrial revolution. And all these breakthrough technologies significantly change the job market structure and the job content. According to the Microsoft research, 65 professions existing today will completely change till 2025. You can see on the slide just several examples of such professions of the future. Please, next slide. In this new reality, the market will need professionals and managers of a different type. Simple operations and mechanic activities will be replaced by complex and creative jobs. And a list of competencies an average employee should have will be significantly extended, as you can see on the left part of the slide. At the same time, a new manager, a leader in this environment will have to possess excellent soft skills to manage all these new talented, creative, and very independent employees. Following the needs of the job market, students' requirements to business programs will also modify. It concerns both, as you can see, the content of the program and the forms of its delivery. The main question is, are traditional Russian business schools able to respond to these new trends? Please, the next slide. Since 1990s, business schools in Russia have been monopolists in business and management education. During the last 10 years, the situation has dramatically changed. We now live in the time of a very tight competition. Besides the increasing internal competition due to the economic turbulence, business schools are now surrounded by very strong external competitors, such as corporate universities and training companies. All of them certainly have their own advantages in the market. But now we face a completely new competitor for traditional business schools. It is the online education, which includes MOOCs and other distance learning courses which are available in the internet. Actually, we entered now the era of the digital education, when anyone can easily get access to the knowledge in any subject he wants, very cheaply or even for free. So a business school has not only stopped to be a monopolist in management education, but even has a risk to be replaced by online platforms. What is then the added value a business school could create in order to stay a leading player in the market? Please, the next slide. First of all, we should remember that a classic MBA program is much more than just a set of courses in management. It provides complexity and integrity of the program curriculum, which gives the deep understanding of all the business processes. A business school also stimulates students to create knowledge themselves in the learning process instead of simple knowledge consumption. Faculty members become not only teachers, but consultants for MBA students. Interactive learning is a very important part of MBA, which forms practical skills and competencies, including soft skills. Cooperation with the real business world is a great advantage for students who come to business schools. And finally, a business school is an excellent platform for best practice exchange and networking, which students would never get from online courses. So a traditional business school can probably be replaced as a knowledge provider, but it can never be replaced as a platform for professional and personal development of a modern leader. But how should we improve? How should we change our classic business programs to make them even more attractive for students with the account of the new trends we face? Please, the next slide. The first solution is gradual switching to the blended learning format. Business schools can use modern technologies to make their programs more convenient, less time-consuming, and less expensive for all students, and especially for international students. Distance learning can cover the theoretical part of the program, including knowledge assessment, and the face-to-face teaching could concentrate on the cornerstones of the business programs, which you can see on the slide: interactive learning forms, real project-based consultancy, working groups, best practice exchange. The second idea, please, the next slide. The second idea is to build an MBA program like a Lego constructor. Students of a new generation are more and more looking for flexibility and customized approach. As the business environment changes very rapidly, MBA programs should be able to easily adapt to students' practical needs. So, on the base of the fundamental general MBA platform, a student could be able to choose a functional concentration or several concentrations related to his or her current professional needs. A personal track of studies should become a part of the opportunities students get when they enter a business school. The next slide, please. So we have discussed only a few trends that we face in business education environment and some opportunities we can use in this context. The answer to the main question of our presentations, do business schools have a future, is certainly positive. But if we want to stay on the top, we should constantly change, adapt our programs to the needs of the market and students, use modern technologies in teaching, while preserving at the same time the fundamental principles of traditional MBA. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Olga. Questions before we move on to our next speaker? All right, thank you very much once again. 2 months ago, I was at Wharton Business School in Philadelphia in the USA, and obviously it's one of the world's most famous business schools. But I was at Knowledge at Wharton, which is actually the digital and the on-learning side, and it is really pioneering by anyone's standards. So we're delighted to have as our next speaker, Vyacheslav Romanov, who is the president of the Wharton Alumni Association here in Russia. Over to you.
Hello, everybody. So far, we had an opportunity to hear opinions of business schools, and I will try to give my opinion as a former student and now employer of MBAs. So first of all, in which reality do we live in? Changes are faster and faster. Try, error, or agile is a new way of inventing things or doing things. Experience is much less relevant than the passion and the flexibility. ability to deliver results under uncertainty and are in high demand. Time to the market is collapsing. People will be switching their careers like 7 or 10 times during their life. And now education is a life learning process. So, and I would argue that in this kind of environment, MBA is the best academic program to prepare people for working in business. And there are no better alternatives. Look, what do we get at the business school? We learn to acquire new areas of knowledge in a week's time. We learn how to make decisions under limited time and limited information. We understand how to navigate organizational dynamics. We learn how to network. We learn how to be creative and manage others. And actually, if you take a look at the skills and take a look at the environment, then it creates new opportunities for fresh MBA graduates. Like 10 or 20 years ago, if you're a fresh MBA graduate to a big organization like Procter & Gamble or IBM, you are disadvantaged because you don't have experience. You don't know how this organization process works. So you need to spend 3 or 5 years to get this experience, and after that you have a chance to apply your fresh knowledge you just got at the business school. And now it's completely different. Now nobody has experience because you cannot have experience in a thing which was invented half a year ago. And when you have a fresh graduate and he or she still have the advantages I mentioned before. So in this kind of environment, MBA graduates are becoming the keys for the management of organizations to the next level, to new products, to new projects. Actually, it's a very good idea to give a project or a business line to a new fresh MBA graduate, still energized and still positively looking to the world, rather than to an employer who spent 10 years in an organization, already demotivated, not energetic, etc., etc. So I think businesses should spend a little bit more time to think about this perspective, and MBA career services should spend a little bit more time to think how to sell this idea to employers. But of course, MBA programs should do some changes to adapt to the current environment. And I think one of the key demands is to adapt education process to how to get new technologies and new business models to the learning process fast enough. And obviously the cases is a too slow method, and the only way to get this knowledge is to get it on the job. If I reflect on my working experience, actually there are 3 areas which were very good for me to get this experience. First is of course internship. We were supposed to have 1 internship at Wharton. I had 3. And one of them helped me to find my real passion in professional life. The second experience was career tracks, or so-called trips to the companies. I attended 8 of them during my MBA program. For example, I attended an investment management track to Boston and to Baltimore, private equity track to India, to Moscow, to London, and to Boston, entrepreneurship track to New York, etc., etc. And these tracks work like you come to a company and you spend an hour or 2 with top management to ask questions and to understand how they work. And the third area where I got very good on-the-job experience was so-called global modular course. It was just implemented at Wharton in 2011. And the idea was the following. I attended a course called Supply Chain Management in China. So we spent several lectures, we got several lectures in Philadelphia, and then we went to China for a week, to Shanghai, to Shenzhen, and to Hong Kong. And the agenda was, in the first part of the day, we visited 1, 2, 3 companies for a longer period of time, like for 2 or 3 hours. We asked questions, we met management, we saw the business processes, and then in the evening we had a debrief with professors who were experienced in studying China, and we basically discussed what have we seen, what does it mean. And later on we had to write a paper about our experience back in Philadelphia. So this type of experiences, I think, should stop being like a feature for MBA education and start being a core. That means how do they design the MBA program around events which help you to get on a job experience? And one idea I can say here is, why don't we think that a normal 2-year program should have not 1 internship, but 4? Why don't we design it so that students can have 2 internships during the summer, 1 internship during the first year, part-time internship, and 1 more internship during the second year? Again, part-time internship. And this way will stimulate students to, first of all, to get some knowledge or skills in the classroom, but then to reflect on it in the business environment. But also, when they think about this integration to the business, that business itself should be ready to work with business schools. We heard before that businesses have many arguments against MBA programs, but are they really ready to cooperate? Are they ready to make business schools programs better? It's a challenge for them. But of course, I now discuss some practical things. We should also think about academic part. And here we're coming to, I think, a wider program, that the academic world itself is not adapting fast enough to the changes I mentioned. For example, it still takes you a year to publish a paper. When experiment is completed, when the text is written, 1 year. Why is it so slow? Okay, you can do these things in this way in the natural sciences like physics, mathematics, but this is totally not acceptable in social sciences like business. There should be something should be changed in the academia world, but of course it's not the topic of our discussion. Let's move closer to the business school program, and here we have a core thing for education is case. Why does it take 1 year to prepare a case? I got very beautiful cases in my business school, but if I reflect on them, most of them were quite not so fresh, I would say. And how it should be done, that we have something in use and in 3 months we have a case in the classroom. I work in investment management. It takes me 1 month to write a 50 pages report on an industry. Why does it take a professor 1 year to write a case? And the last topic I want to mention today is lifelong learning. Many speakers before mentioned that we'll learn through our life, and it's like a necessary thing to stay relevant. And business schools should definitely offer a systematic solution to these demands from the clients. And I think one way will be to invent MBA 2.0 program. For example, I graduated from a full-time MBA, and in 10 years, I have a chance to attend a 6-month program, part-time or full-time, it's debatable, with people from my class or from similar classes, to reflect on our experiences and to get up-to-date knowledge in business, in management, to listen to professors, to go to the companies again, to get their perspective, to refresh yourself. And the demands can be the same. In 10 years' time, some people want to switch their career. Some people are stuck and they want to boost in responsibilities and salary. And some people want to just have a break to reflect on their experience, to be ready for the next stage in their life. I can generate more ideas, but so far, let me stop. I'm ready to answer any questions or pass it to the next speaker.
All right, thank you very much indeed. We've got 3 deans on our right here, and I must admit, I do agree with you. My time at Harvard Business School, we did 3 cases a day, every day, and they were great, but they were pretty old, some of them. Does it take a year to write a case, and if so, why?
Well, if you want to write a good case, it might take 2 years, or even more. So it sometimes takes a lot. If you talk about short cases, like examples, it might take less than months. I mean, every professor in our school prepares some materials basing on real-life cases that happened yesterday, today in the morning, and we do use them. And I wanted to reflect to the last idea of MBA 2.0. It's actually we had the same idea, and we called it post-MBA. To gather the graduates after some time and refresh and recap what they learned and during their experience, and maybe that would be beneficial to all of them and to the school as well.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting critique. To be honest, I also, as a dean, I also fight some of my professors that stick to cases of where dinosaurs were still the boss of the world. And why do they stick to some of these older cases? Well, sometimes there are two motivations for that. Sometimes it's a very positive motivation, like in some cases you can really demonstrate certain kind of mechanisms that you know as a teacher that are still relevant today, but unluckily that case has data from an industry some time ago or so. But the way of, for instance, for a pricing case, there are not so many good pricing cases. If you're a marketing teacher, you have to do pricing. Sometimes, you're seduced to use that older case because you know it's damn so good to teach that. But there's a second motivation why professors use old cases, and that is laziness, naturally. And sometimes they have a lot of things to do. All my professors are really stressed because they have to combine that. It's not that they just have to write cases, they have to combine 20 roles. And I also ask them to become more and more customer, student friendly and so on. But there is naturally a little bit of laziness sometimes involved. Let's face it, you have a good case on iTunes. Well, iTunes is out. I'm sorry, that case has to be. It's Spotify now, so if you like the music industry, then you use Spotify or whatever. But I think, it should be, we should motivate them more to change that, I think. So, yes, I accept the critique. Partly.
Any questions from the audience? Two in the front row.
Спасибо. У меня два вопроса. Первый вопрос.
Thank you. I have two questions. The first question is whether respected speaker who's finished the business school and is now an employer. Please tell me, we've heard in this forum that in Russia the biggest problem with education is teaching adults. If worldwide 50% of all learners are adults, in Russia only 15%. So what's your opinion? What's your take as an employer? Is it to do with employers who don't want to have competent workers, or it's about laziness of other people who don't want to learn? And the second question about cases. However fresh a case is, it's still history. And I think the time of case-based learning are gone. So robots could be created such cases and situations that, it makes it all irrelevant. Maybe it's better to go away from cases, but to teach learners to design new situations. Thank you. Well, I believe that employers in Russia are investing on the job training much less than they do in other developed countries. What I observed in the US, take consulting investment basement, take Procter & Gamble, a person joins a company, and then they will spend 2 months in investment bank before they are even admitted to an Excel spreadsheet, because the mistakes would cost a lot. I've been on an internship in investment bank. They spent 2 weeks teaching us before they admitted us to the office, and that's talking about fresh employment. And same things are happening to people who are growing in their jobs. I think we should acquire this culture. And if employers start offering such learning opportunities to their employers, I think everybody will just welcome it. In answering your second question, we're talking about MBA, Master of Business Administration, person who is supposed to make decisions. Any decision in the case, you have inputs, you have people, you have resources, you need to take a decision. So cases, I don't think that cases are going to go away from business schools. It's a way to teach people to make decisions. Of course, we're also saying that modern leaders should be visionaries. They should have design thinking, etc., etc. They should understand IT. Of course, you need to teach them some basic things. through a traditional Russian way, not using a case story. So you tell them something, then you get their feedback, and then you reaffirm it in practice. And here I agree with you that we should use these methods more.
Thank you so much. I have a question to my colleagues. I'm from Graduate School of Management, Elena Skalon, and here is just right now we have heard that very often there is a sort of a faculty resistance to those new things that we are as business schools to implement, and this resistance is caused by many reasons due to stress, to probably workload, or many others, or psychological ones. Could you please share with us probably your best practices and how to overcome such resistance, how to motivate the faculty, even the best one of them, the top one? Thank you so much.
Ну, я могу начать.
Well, I can start. What you just said is completely true. In any school, you have resistance, and the more outstanding faculty you have, the harder it is to reform and make transformations. I'm not a dean, but I know the situation inside. So from what I see is that people who were, the best driver, the best motivation for people who resist them is the feedback from the customers, from our students. Just like in any business school, we do a systemic and regular feedback procedure during the course and after. So you have Net Promoter Score, you have more detailed feedback depending on what KPIs were used initially. You have degree programs, you have specialized programs, you have open programs, and each student have so many criteria and indicators to assess the professor. Each component of the program is looked at, and there's also a question whether cases were relevant, whether you like those cases. So there's a really detailed questionnaire. And again, it's not just one-to-one communication. This feedback is then circulated across the departments, and everyone is aware of those questionnaires and that feedback. And if there's criticism saying that some of the business cases were not relevant or that the methodology does not match, professors are either replaced or professors change themselves. This is the biggest motivation. Otherwise, I would agree with you. It's really, really difficult. This is a tough question. All of our best professors are in demand by the market. They all earn a living for their family. We give them some money, but it's not enough. And that's why there's always a dilemma. They have to comply with the requirements of the school, but they also have to do something outside of our school to earn their living. So we definitely need a lot of communication, a lot of convincing. We need to hammer it home into their minds, so that they need to record programs, that they need to do better. Earlier we had a session on engagement, and many said that laziness is the best driver. So they don't want to do it, but you have to convince them somehow so that they get out of that laziness and do something positive along the mainstream direction of the school's development strategy.
for your comments. I'm going to move on to our last speaker of the day now so that we have plenty of time. Happy to take some more questions at the end if we do have that time. So I'd like to welcome now Blair Shepherd. Blair, highly experienced both as an academic but also now as a business leader and consultant. A former dean of one of the top schools in Asia, the creator of the corporate education program at highly respected Duke in the USA, and now global leader for strategy and leadership development at PwC. Welcome.
So thank you. It's actually a thrill to listen to the 5 speakers before as a person who actually was in the business for 33 years and is now on the buyer side. And I have to admit, I'm profoundly worried. Profoundly worried. Let's sort of think about what we really mean by disruption for a minute, right? I think there are sort of 5 consequences of disruption that force us to rethink entirely what a school means, not just what an MBA program means, right? So let's do the first one. We are entering a world of radically changing business models. Now, the consequence of that is that all of the established players find themselves having to rethink themselves at an increasingly accelerated rate, and they have to do so while making money at the same time, right? And one of the risks is we think the job of the business school is to actually teach the innovator who's going to put those institutions out of business, but you also have to help the institutions that are trying to survive at the same time. And it's the notion of disruption as we're presently experiencing it is small relative to what we are going to experience, and therefore the nature of the challenge is going to get more acute every year. The second piece is because that's happening so fast, the economic institutional infrastructure in which business exists isn't fit to task, right? So the institutions that we have don't work. And so it's not enough to sort of say we have to prepare people to do the innovation and the disruption. We actually have to prepare the people to create the context that allows that to occur successfully. The third piece is that as a consequence of disruption, we are going to have the largest loss of work in the history of the world. And so one of the consequences, just simple consequence for business schools, is the number of people who will go to business school will be less because there's far fewer people who will be employed as a consequence, right? And I think the implication is that it becomes increasingly critical for the business school to not be separate from society and help prepare the people kind of at a distance, but actually be a part of the work creation process that we're so going to desperately need. The third piece is that there will be a continuous change in the nature of the relationship between people and technology. So what it means to be smart in today's world will be completely different 5 years from now and completely different 10 years from then. So in a sense, if you think about the way in which we use mobile technology will be replaced by the way in which we use implants, right? And so that actually the interface between machine and person becomes a really critical question, which I don't think we're actually sufficiently reflective of. And then the fifth point is that if you put all 4 of those together, the nature of the problems the world is going to confront are bigger, more extreme, and come faster. So take those 5 things and ask yourself, is any school doing what we need to help us solve that problem? Right? And I think the important point is the following issue. And I'm deeply worried, but I'm actually kind of thrilled by a few things I heard. So let me reflect on some of the points that are positive, but then sort of put a challenge forward to the people who are now in the trade I used to be in. The first is, it's wrong to think about the program being the issue. It's actually the school which is the issue. It's the thing itself, which is delivering the program, which is most threatened. So if you sort of assume the world is about to be disrupted, we have to assume the same thing of education, right? And to sort of say, I'm going to retain the institution that I now know and deliver a different program is actually missing the whole point of disruption. So I think the first challenge I have for the group who are here and all of us who care about education is what are we going to do about the institutions themselves? the schools themselves. And if you take the 5 points, let me just sort of pick on a few issues associated with that. If there's radically changing business models for the clients of business schools, it implies that there are radically changing business models for schools themselves. We have to completely alter the cost structure of some of the things we do. We have to completely alter the creation of value. I love the notion of a boutique business school, by the way, because it's an example of someone who's attempting to do that as an illustration, right? Second piece is, you think about that the institutions themselves are being put in play. One of the jobs of a business school, of any university, is to be kind of the conscience of society. So it seems to me that a key requirement of significant business schools in the world is how co-create the institutional ecosystems we need to actually create the context for business to thrive. That actually puts in risk the whole notion of a university being separate from and isolated from the societies of which we're a part. And it sort of reminds me of when the English university system became great, is when the coffee shops located beside the universities, and they actually had the real conversations in the coffee shops. Right? It turns out Newton invented theory of mechanics in a coffee shop, not in the university, right? And the reason for that is he actually was engaged with the real society of which he was a part, where when he was back in the university, he had to teach a religious predicated logic, right? Now, I think we, by analogy, are teaching old theology in a world where we need to be roughing it up in the world itself and helping co-create the ecosystems that will help our countries thrive and survive. If you take this notion of rapid loss of work and transformation of work, I think we actually have to be in the business of work creation. Right? That there's a difference between saying, are we going to help people learn how to be entrepreneurs and then send them out into the world? And so I'm actually going to be part of the communities in which I'm embedded and actually create the massive number of new jobs we're going to have. And I'll come back to why I think that's critical for the programs we need to do, but let me just sort of stop there on this notion of transformation of work. If you think about continuously changing relation between technology and people, I think one of the requirements of business schools and universities broadly is to consider the collateral impacts of our technology before they happen. So the thing we've learned over the last 3 years is every cool technology has unintended consequences. We didn't think about those, and they put society at major risk. And then we had to remediate, and it's a bit late, right? And so it seems to me that a requirement of the school itself as the conscience of society is actually say, what is this technology going to do, and how do we humanize its effects before it actually gets put into play? The other piece is that the schools themselves have to become dynamic as institutions if actually that whole thing's going to play out. And then the final one is the whole meaning of knowledge creation changes, right? What does it mean to engage artificial intelligence to do research in a school? I think actually case creation gets way faster when we do that, by the way, right? And then the final one, if you think about big complex problems, I think it becomes really incumbent upon business schools to find the combination of deep experts and large-scale integrated thinkers. So we need to have a multidisciplinary approach and an integrated approach to the way in which we think about the problems we're both trying to study and teach. So the first point is that actually the schools themselves have to change. And then if you sort of say that's true, let's think about what that means for the programs a little bit, right? I think the first thing is that radically changing business models is going to force us to think about new ideas on an increasingly accelerated rate so that the new content has to accelerate itself. And then we actually have to sort of do a piece that says, let's talk about how you make money in the real world today while you're changing at the same time. Because one of the real challenges that most firms are experiencing who are trying to manage disruption is they're mismanaging the how fast do I change versus how do I keep the cash flow coming to afford me to allow to change, right? And actually, so there's this kind of down and dirty stuff about making money at the same time we're actually adapting, right? Then if you think about challenging existing institutional infrastructure and the fact that they're not adaptive, we have to actually get people to reflect on what does it mean to be a member of the society of which we're a part if we're going to be in business. Right? Now, we do that in a kind of casual way. We don't do it in a profoundly serious way. Think about rapid loss of work. The clear implication of that is that people never leave school. Right? So the idea of I come back 10 years later is way too late, right? I mean, I love the idea, but actually you should never leave school, right? Because the probability that you are irrelevant a year from now is really high, right? So one of the things we're doing in PwC is we actually have this digital IQ measure and 600 things available for them to learn behind that, and we actually keep increasing how hard the measure is. Because we're saying your job is to remain constantly on top of things, right? And so I think that changes the nature of a program dramatically. I think about continuously changing human-technology interface. I think we have to change the meaning of the experience between people and technology in the programs we run. So blended is not a deep enough proposition. It's the right idea, but it's not a deep enough proposition. And then we have to continuously think about how do we make the next class way smarter than the previous class because of the supplement of technology to their intelligence and their insight. And then big complex problems, I think we have to get people to actually learn how to do integrative thinking again. And we have to teach character. Because if we put all this together, the biggest risk isn't that we're going to miss the execution problem that I spend a lot of time on. The biggest risk is that we will not have the people leading business who are the appropriately self-reflective members of society that we need, given the world I just described, right? So, thus my anxiety. I love the start everyone's made. It is nowhere near deep enough or fast enough. And so please, go deeper, go quicker. And please, change your institutions at the same time you're changing your programs.
Blair, thank you. That is a really profound look at our industry. I'm sure there's many questions. I know we have to finish, in theory, on paper, in 2 minutes' time, but we're okay, Sergey and Ashot, to remain in this room for longer and have questions for people who'd like to stay? Brilliant, thank you. We'll start by taking the first question and getting through them as quick as we can.
I'd just like to pick up on Blair's point. My name's Nick Obolensky. I'm an MBA graduate from IMD, or was MBA, also CEO of an organization called Complex Adaptive Leadership. This year, or last year, the EFMD awarded 2 medals for executive education, a gold medal and a silver medal. What was interesting is that the 2 medals were won by 2 companies which are 5 years old and virtual, and they beat standard business schools, CCL, DDI. So the question I have is, to what extent the change that Blair has asked for is actually going to happen, and what will the business school look like in 5 years' time? Will it still have professors writing business cases, expensive overheads, or to what extent will business schools need to move to virtuality and disrupt themselves in order to enable others to be disruptive? I'd like to actually have a vision answering Blair's challenge. Thank you.
Konstantin, could we start with you and just work down, literally work across the floor here with some quick answers? I'm told we've had this room for another 10 minutes, so we'll absolutely take the full 10 minutes and be as quick and incisive in our answers as we can. Okay. Question from an IMD alum. Over to you to answer it then. Okay, very simply, given Blair's realistic and slightly pessimistic, but actually I think very realistic opinion, what is the future of business schools in 5 to 6 years' time in terms of transformation?
What will they actually look like?
What will they look like?
Yeah, interesting. First, quick answer, difficult to predict. but the direction is quite clear. So I would think that the business schools would be much more centered about the individual, and definitely all the business fundamentals, technological skills, everything that can be passed to the online providers to some easier, cheaper, or maybe even free solutions, this would go away. But something that cannot be replaced by artificial intelligence, by online providers, by simple solutions, everything which is centered about individual, about learning soft skills, emotional intelligence, interacting with others, real face-to-face networking, and learning how to impact, engage, and motivate others. So this will stay. Literally, from my perspective, the direction would be more into the individual-centered networking community. But as a format, as a business model, of course, much more sophisticated than I just described. But the direction, I would say, it's there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's take that question slightly, even more radically. If you took the smartest people on the planet who saw Blair's vision, but had no experience of running a business school, and therefore were not handicapped by having faculty and buildings, Paul, what would that fresh business school that could meet these challenges look like, that's unencumbered by the existing thinking of an existing business school?
Yeah, I think we're all trapped in a dominant industry logic naturally. That logic is also institutionalized, let's face that, because in many countries, governments do provide subsidies and things like that. So I think there's a lot of institutionalization in this industry. And so we're also blinded naturally by all kinds of other routines, let's face that, they're like many industries that face transformation. Just as an example, if I would go, we're an independent school, but if you belong to a business school that is belong to a university, you go to the rector and you would say like, we don't want a new building, we want to have a boat, yeah, and we go with our full-time master students 1 year with a boat to different locations in the world. We have classes on board. We visit the slums there, and we visit social entrepreneurs here. We visit companies and so on. I think that's a model that could, for instance, approach what we need, yeah, in one way or another. But definitely the logic is of a campus and meeting rooms and lecture rooms, even the name itself already is not suited for the job. So we're all trapped in industry logic, which is reinforced by accreditations, by regulations in countries, etc., etc. So I think that blocks naturally this industry in moving fast. So we're late runners then, and that's why some new companies they can jump on it and they disrupt the industry, and there's nothing wrong on that because basically they kick us in our asses and they say like move, yeah. But it's difficult naturally to move in such a institutionalized environment. I think that the future business school should be either a platform builder and a platform provider, linking to the platform small startups, companies like the ones you mentioned, and be a kind of a platform provider, a network broker, something like that. Right? It could also be a content provider on certain aspects, probably not on all of them. We have to become much more selective, which means also risk not offering everything anymore. So then we can link ourselves to another platform and become a provider there. So these are just a few elements of the future, of what the future might bring. But sure, given the time constraint, this is a very limited. But just the last point, I think, for instance, also now what you see over the last 10 years in America, I think the fees that they ask for bachelor students and for master students have like quadrupled or something on average. I think it's really way up, and every year they increase that price. I find that a sign of weakness, because that is like milking the cash cow, yeah, as long as it's possible. they even don't spend, the bigger schools in America, for instance, they don't spend part of that increase in new things or so. So it's really filling classrooms, it's selling seats, yeah? And that's not the way naturally to change. You could even think of another model, yeah, but that's I wouldn't be the dean that dares to do that because, it can cost your head and then nobody dares that, I guess. But why do we ask students to pay in advance for their study? If it's lifelong learning anyway, then you could say like, I pay students to come to me and I select the most talented ones, and I get a percentage on their career in the future, yeah? And that's a very different model. It's more like in the football world, yeah, where you invest in youngsters, but then you kind of get a percentage on their next career moves. That is a very different pricing model, but yeah, you should be very audacious to change that, yeah? But just an example, yeah?
Thank you, Paul. Constantine.
Yeah. Well, to make that short, I think that in 5-6 year perspective, for most of the companies, for many companies, but probably for the most of the business schools, I'm sorry, nothing will change, because the rules of the game, and the business schools are like turtles. They have a giant shield, and they are protected with the states, with endowment funds, with their customers. The market is still big, so not much will change because of that. And if you collect the brightest minds of the earth, I don't know what they will come out with, but probably it will be something different than a business school. And I agree pretty much that we don't understand what is disruption. And when you was asking the question, I was thinking, okay, well, it also applies to, for example, research that business schools do, and for the articles. And that will not change that fast, I think, unfortunately.
Very interesting, some very varied views. Of course, Blair, sorry.
So two things in the reflections. I actually think there's a wonderful piece of honesty in what they said, which is the institutional structure in which universities and business schools are embedded is actually a constraint, right? But just let me give you one personal example. When we carved the executive education business out of VUCA and created Do Corporate Education, we went with a model that didn't exist before, right? And 4 years later, it was #1 in the world for 12 years in a row, against the criteria that Harvard and IMD had actually established, right, because they were the leaders at the time. It's possible, the point is, it's possible to win in a hostile institutional context if you're thoughtful enough about the thing you're creating. Because the point I want to highlight here is, well, business schools don't change, the world is changing, right? So either business schools respond to that world, or they are gone eventually, right? And therefore, the inability to respond to the institutional constraints stops becoming a viable excuse. Now, let me personalize this. That's also true of audit firms. If we don't actually change the meaning of an audit in light of what the world looks like, a $15 billion business is gone, right? Now, I tell you, I'm sleepless about that, right? I think everyone here should be sleepless the same way about the things they're responsible for, because the world is not slowing down, right? And that's the presenting problem.
It's very interesting. I was at Columbia Business School in New York in November, and their cohort this year is at a record high, 1,000 full-time 2-year MBAs. So you can understand why the market's a bit confused. You're talking quite rightly, Blair, about the need for urgent change, and yet in some parts of the world, and I could quote some Indian and Chinese schools as well, they're just doing better than ever with what they're currently offering. So it is a fascinating and unique... The conclusion is almost, if not enough is done now, because some schools are doing pretty well, the change will be very sudden in a very short piece of time, like an electric shock. Is that what you would say?
Same problem. We grew 7% last year. Right? Same problem. I promise we grew 7% last year on a model that will not exist 5 years from now.
fascinating. Sergei, I think we ought to not overstay our welcome in the room now. It's been a wonderful session. Thanks to all of you. Thanks to some brilliant translation, which really has been excellent. Often we don't thank our translators enough. And thank you all for your questions, for listening, and for staying.
Could we also give an applause to our host, Sergei Miaseyedov, please? Yeah.